Yo, what's good, everybody? This is Antoine of Antoine Chambers Consulting, and that's my intro. That's all I got for you. But anywho, hopefully everybody is doing well, and that your day so far has been blessed. I am going to share for a couple of minutes. You can come on in if you're going to hang out. Feel free to leave your name so that I know that you're here. Got to make sure that all my systems are up and running. So I'm going to share something that I've never shared before. Yesterday, I shared a post, and in that post, I said, "We defend what we know, even if it's wrong." Why? Because our ideology has become our identity. So we defend what we know, even if it's wrong, because our ideology has become our identity. So today, for a few minutes, I'm going to talk about identity. I'm going to talk about how my ideologies and how my life and the things that I've experienced created somewhat of an identity crisis. And when you experience an identity crisis in your life, in your business, in your family, and your beliefs, you start to question a lot of things, but at the same time, you just continue to do what you do. So, talking about the identity crisis, talking about the fact that many of us have been here. We may have come from different walks of life, but we've all experienced having being taught things and have learned different perspectives of life that have affected our lives. And if you're going to hang out, feel free to let me know that you're here. Feel free to comment. You can like and share and do all of that type of stuff. But anyway, so for me, I grew up in a situation where church was at the center, the epicenter of my life. Church attendance, being on time for church, being present at church. And there were a lot of principles that I was taught, a lot of ideas and ideologies that I was taught that I conformed to because it was just the way life was. So I grew up in church, musician for the church, and leader in the church. And in all of these things, I learned that, I was getting these ideologies and these ideas that were sometimes not fully thought out. Sometimes they weren't even very clear and transparent. And if you're going to hang out, let me know that you're here so I can greet you. So my identity crisis came when the ideologies that I was being taught was fighting against my ideas. So the ideologies that I was taught was fighting against my ideas, those things that came naturally to me, whether they were good or bad. The ideologies affected what I did, how I did, and how I even live. And some of you may be like that too. Some people break the cycle at different points in their life than others, but we've all gone through this point of this reckoning, this moment where you're like, I know what my life has been. I also know what I do, but do I know who I am? I know what my life has been. I know everything that's transpired, or I know what I remember of what transpired. I know what I do, what my activities are, but do I know who I am? And the challenge of finding out who you are means that you have to question the ideologies that you were taught that may have been right, some may have been wrong, but they were contrary to what you believe God called you to be. So as you grow as you grow and develop who you are, you'll realize that sometimes your thought processes and the things that you see, the things that you understand, are possibly different from your perspective on life. So your life is built or designed or created by a series of incidents, a series of happenings, a series of questions, a series of thoughts. And Siri thinks I'm talking to her in this moment. I'm not talking to Siri. So your life goes through some processes. So for me, I went through elementary, middle school, high school, college, post-secondary education, business, and all of these leadership opportunities, living a life that was perfectly fine in the eyes of everybody else, because it was my ideologies were to be almost a people pleaser, be a person that made things work for others, even if it didn't work for you. So sometimes as a giver, as a thinker, you're always willing to give. But the identity crisis comes in where when what you think should be happening and what is happening are two different things. So now you're torn between reality, the reality that you're living, and the reality that you desire to exist in. So you're being torn between the reality that you're forced to live in and the reality that you want to live in because of exterior forces or external forces. So you find yourself in a constant battle against you. So the Bible says that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. And I think in our life, sometimes the flesh and blood that we are wrestling against is our own flesh and blood. It is our own desires, our own thought processes. So for me, I have lived a life that has been pleasing, I believe, in God's eyes, pleasing even in people's eyes. But for me, it was like, is this really the path? Sometimes we have our ideas and our ideologies that we've been taught that seem off, but we live them because it's the right thing to do, or it's perceived to be the right thing to do. So for me, I ended up always trying to do the best thing, trying to do the right thing, trying to be the person that was grounded. And sometimes you don't feel like being grounded. Sometimes you feel like being that other guy. So for me, the identity crisis or the challenge that I faced was like, yo, some of the stuff I'm doing, I don't want to do. And it wasn't even bad stuff. It was just stuff that I felt I was accountable to so many people to do the things that were in their best interest, and in turn leaving me by myself or leaving me alienated because I can't do what I want to do. I have to do what's in the best interest of everybody else that's involved. And I don't know if anybody else is like me and that you've been in that position to where everybody else matters but you. Everybody else is valuable but you. Everybody else, you see them accomplishing, but you are not in that same position. So the identity crisis for a lot of us happens when what we desire to be is different than what we're expected to be. So the identity crisis happens when what we desire to be is different than what people expect us to be. But then between me and others, there's still God that has an expectation, but we tend to, in some cases, depending on your belief system, we tend to swing towards being accepted by other people because those are the people that we see often. Those are the people that are connected to us. Versus saying, you know what, I don't want to be what you want me to be, especially if it means that I'm not being what God has already called me to be. Um, I don't want to be muzzled because I want to please you. I don't want to fall apart because I want to please you. And I don't know if you have been there, but I know a lot of people that have been in this position to where they feel bound in their own lives. They feel like they're enchained and shackled in their own lives because it's like, well, I can't say this, I can't do this because what will they say? What will they think? And there was a statistic that talked about how a high number of people, once they reach their teenage years, or normally like the age of 18, and they're leaving their parents' home, they're graduating, they tend to leave the church because now they they leave the church because they're ready to explore different things because they've been bound by culture and ideology that though it may be accurate was not taught effectively. So because it wasn't taught effectively, you have conformed to something that you were never meant to conform to. The Bible talks about that we have to be transformed by the renewing of our minds, but in the reality of it all, sometimes we're not we don't get the opportunity to be transformed because we're too busy conforming. We're trying to be like what everybody expects, but God is saying, well, I know what people expect, but I am the great expectation. So you have to trust in me and follow me, even if it doesn't look like what people want it to look like, even if you have to say things that are not in line with what people want to hear, you have to do what I've called you to do. And my relationship with you and your relationship with me is greater than all of these other things, because if you put me first, everything else will happen. So that's kind of my thought today on the identity crisis. That's kind of round one of it. So hopefully you can take some value from this, and I will see you all soon. Have a great day. Peace.